Welcome to the Eat Better, Feel Better podcast. I'm Lisa Swable. Let's dive in. So, today I want to ask you some questions to start us off. Okay. Do you wake up tired? Have you decided that you are most definitely not a morning person? Are you the person, your alarm goes off in the morning and you just cannot believe that it's already morning time and you've got to get up and start your day, and everybody around you are jumping up and getting ready and you're just thinking, oh my God, I need another 2 hours in bed. There's no way I can get up now and function and do my day. Or maybe you find that you do manage to get up and you struggle through your day, or your energy is not too bad, but then around 4 p.m. you have a massive energy slump and you just need to have a nap on the sofa. You're really struggling. Maybe you're going for some sugar or some coffee to get you through the rest of the day, and you feel really, really tired and you think, oh my God, I can't wait to get to bed tonight. I'm going to have the best sleep. I'm so tired. And then by the time it gets to sort of 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, you've had a second wind, you're wide awake, you cannot sleep, your brain's going churning around like the little hamster on the wheel, and you are so psyched up that you actually cannot now go to sleep. You're actually feeling quite stressed all the time, you can't switch off, you lie in bed at night and your brain is going and it's all on full charge, and literally you're finding that the timings that you're tired and the timings that you're energized are all off kilter, and that you should be feeling energy in the morning, and actually in the morning you're really struggling, and in the afternoon you start to really feel that dip when actually you've just had lunch and you should be absolutely fine. Or maybe you're somebody that you've had a diagnosis recently of something that, as we know from previous podcasts and from the Eat Better, Feel Better plan, that it's actually driven by inflammation. So things like, is your blood pressure raised? Is your cholesterol raised? Or maybe your blood sugar is raised. Or maybe you're struggling with hormones. Maybe your menopause is causing problems. You're really finding that everything is just a really hard slog and you are so tired, you just don't have a lot of energy. So all of these things, they actually can come down to our nervous system and our regulation of our nervous system. It's an area of our body that we don't often think about. We think about our diet, we think about our gut health, we think about mental health and well-being, and we'll think maybe about balancing our hormones and things like that. But sometimes we don't remember to think about our nervous system. And our nervous system is such a huge major system in the body, and of course it can impact our energy levels over the course of the day. It can impact a lot of our health aspects. It can really drive things like inflammatory conditions, chronic conditions. It can make it really difficult for the body to get into a safe place where it feels ready to get well and to feel better again. While your nervous system is all out of kilter, that's not going to happen. So I thought today I'd cover a little bit about nervous system regulation and how we can support our nervous system health to avoid these pitfalls and to really sort of bring down inflammation in the body from a more holistic naturopathic perspective, as opposed to from a nutrition perspective, which is where I normally come from, these sorts of things. So let's talk a little bit about what do I mean by the nervous system. So I think a lot of us will sort of equate the nervous system to the brain, to our feelings, our emotion. It's also obviously our senses. So anything to do with touch or smell or hearing, all of these things are going to be connected to the nervous system. And so the nervous system is doing a lot of things in the body. It's working all the time. It never switches off. It's a system that has to be going all the time, and it needs to be optimized all the time. And so obviously these sorts of systems, when they're not being supported properly by the body, can really start to break down and get very dysregulated and cause a lot of problems. So in the nervous system, we've obviously got our sort of the part of the nervous system that we control, when we choose to focus on things, to touch things, to feel things, whatever. But we've also got what we call the autonomic nervous system, and this is the slightly more hidden nervous system in the body. So the autonomic nervous system, that covers things like our breathing. We don't think about our breathing, we just breathe naturally. It regulates our heartbeat. So again, we don't really control our heart beating, it just happens automatically, and that is the autonomic nervous system getting our heart rate to a good level and maintaining it. Our autonomic nervous system also manages our digestive system. So if our autonomic nervous system is in a happy place, in rest and digest mode, which I'll talk about in a minute, digestion is all optimized and goes really well. When it's in a different state, which is called the sympathetic nervous system state, then things like digestion can really get messed up. So things like IBS can become a real issue. Even things like blood pressure, the autonomic nervous system controls the dilation and constriction of our blood vessels, and so therefore it can impact our blood pressure. So the autonomic nervous system, which is this part of our nervous system that we don't actually have much control over, it happens sort of behind the scenes, if you like, it has two different states. It's got the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So the parasympathetic state is the state that we really want to be in most of the time. It's our rest and digest stage. This is the stage when we're doing repair, we're clearing out toxins from the day, we're digesting, we're resting, we're building new cells and clearing out our brain from what's been going on in the day and all that kind of stuff. So the parasympathetic nervous system is sort of the good nervous system. That's the state that we want to be in most of the time. And then we have what is called the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight mode. And I think a lot of people have heard of fight and flight mode. So you may not realize that actually what that is it's a term to describe the sympathetic nervous system. So it's a part of this nervous system that we can't control and that we go into sometimes for various different reasons. And we are meant to go into these two different states, the parasympathetic rest and digest and the sympathetic fight and flight. We're meant to go into these two different states seamlessly over the course of the day, but we're meant to be in the sympathetic, the fight and flight mode for a short period of time. And then most of the time we should be in our parasympathetic mode, in our rest and digest mode. So a lot of the time though, this doesn't happen. So a lot of the time we're spending now more and more in this sympathetic, this fight and flight state. And what does that mean? Well, like I've said, when we're in the sympathetic nervous system state, we are in fight and flight mode. So our blood pressure is raised, our heart starts racing, our digestion gets impacted. So it either stops completely and shuts down, causing constipation, or it speeds up to release, the food that it's holding, and that will cause diarrhea. And also, when we're in this state, we're releasing cortisol from our adrenals. And I know we talk about cortisol a lot, but of course, cortisol is one of the main hormones in the body. It really impacts a lot of other hormones when it's out of sync. And this kind of nervous system dysregulation can really bring our cortisol into dysregulation as well. So let's revise a little bit what cortisol is. So cortisol is a hormone, like I say, and it has a sort of a yin and a yang. It has a good and a bad side. So the good side of cortisol is it gets released, it has a daily cycle, a 24-hour cycle, and it's meant to be released in the morning when we're waking up to give us our oomph and our effort to get out of bed in the morning. That's cortisol having a spike and getting you up and getting you started for your day. And the cortisol is meant to stay quite high over the course of the morning, have a slight dip after lunch, but just a small one, not a proper tank, just a slight dip. And then it peaks again for the second part of the day, and then it tapers off as we get into the evening. But what happens sometimes is that the cortisol gets dysregulated because we're spending too much time in this fight and flight mode. And therefore, the cortisol, the timings of that 24-hour cycle get all out of sync. So if you're somebody that is struggling to get up in the morning and you're a really slow morning person, it could be you're not getting that spike of cortisol like you're meant to first thing in the morning. If you're somebody that's wide awake at 10 o'clock at night, you're having your second wind and you're too wired to go to bed, your cortisol's peaked at the wrong time of the day. So again, it's out of regulation. So we really want to sort of understand why that's happening, and then we can bring the body back into balance and sort of address cortisol and address this fight and flight mode to try and get us back into our parasympathetic, our rest and digest mode. And it's really going to help to bring down all those inflammatory markers and to aid digestion, to aid sleep, all these different things, to balance our energy levels. This is what we need to be addressing. So why does this happen? What is going on in the body? So what I want to do is I want to take you back about 2 millennia, thousands of years. We're going to go back to when we were cave women and we were living on the African savannah in our tribes. And, you know, all you can see for miles around is the grasses and trees. And, you know, we're basically, we're living this nomadic lifestyle that we were born to lead. We are being the hunter-gatherers in our tribes. This is how we were for thousands and thousands of years. And genetically, that's what we evolved to do. And the problem is that our bodies haven't evolved as quickly as our modern lifestyle has. So for a second, I want you just to imagine you are going back to that hunter-gatherer, nomadic cave women times. So in those times, you've slept at night because it's dark and there's nothing else to do. So you're sleeping. And in the morning, as the sun comes up and the bright sunlight hits your face, hits your body, that's when your cortisol would spike up to wake you up, to get you ready for the day. You know, this is a time of day when all the other animals around you are waking up. Some of them might want to be hunting you. Some of them you might want to be hunting. You know, the person that sleeps all day is the person that gets eaten by the tiger. So you really have to get up when the sun comes up, your cortisol spikes to get you up and get you ready for the day. Because we live in this African savanna, we are hunter-gatherers, we don't have fridges, we don't have kitchens, we don't have the supermarket down the road or Starbucks to pop into. We have to now go and hunt and gather our food for us, for our families, for the day ahead. There's no food storage. It's very unlikely there's going to be much food in the immediate vicinity of where we are. So we now have to get up, and on an empty stomach, we have to walk maybe, 5-10 kilometers in the sun to hunt and gather for food for us and for our families, for the tribe. So we would manage to then spend the whole sort of morning hunting and gathering, getting our food, walking around, doing thousands and thousands of steps, walking around. And the only time where there might be a real sort of proper spike in cortisol is if we might be confronted with some sort of danger, maybe a tiger, maybe a bear, I don't know, maybe an accident, you fall over, something like that, an injury. But as soon as that immediate danger has passed, your cortisol comes straight back down again. The tiger's gone, the bear's been killed, whatever it is, and your cortisol levels come back down, and you carry on with your day, and you carry on hunting and gathering. You'll stop to have some food at lunchtime. That's when the sun's highest in the sky. So that's when you might have a little rest, and you might have a slight dip in your cortisol while you have a little rest after your food. But because the sun is high in the sky and it's so hot, all the animals around you are all doing the same thing. You know, don't forget, we are animals. We are fundamentally creatures of habit. We're animals. This is how we've naturally evolved. So we now have we've now had something to eat, we've had a rest, we now need to get back to camp. So again, our cortisol spikes a little bit, just a gentle spike to give us the energy, to give us the to get ourselves with all the food that we've hunted and gathered back to our loved ones, back to the camp, back to our tribe, so that we can then enjoy our food, our supper, our probably, one proper meal of the day in our camp. And then as the sun sets, cortisol drains away, melatonin comes up, and we can now sleep. It's safe to sleep. We're in our tribe, we're back at camp, everybody's safe and looking out for each other, and it's time to go to sleep. And this is how our energy would have been spent over the course of the day for thousands and thousands of years. And this is also how our cortisol would have been regulated over the course of the day. And this in turn would have kept us in this rest and digest, this parasympathetic stage, quite comfortably for probably sort of 80% of the day. And then there'd be odd times where we'd go into fight and flight mode, to deal with a present danger or something like that. And then that state would quickly flip back into the rest and digest mode. So this is how we have evolved to live, and this is how our bodies still do live. Our bodies still think that we are living in these times, because it's only really in the last, say, 1,000 years, 1,500 years, that things have changed so dramatically in our lifestyles. But your genes take millions of years to change. So your genes still think that you are this hunter-gatherer on the African savanna, okay? So we need to think in that mode to understand what is going on. Right, okay. So what we need to think about now is how life has changed and how that is impacting our fight and flight mode, our nervous system regulation, how we can keep into our rest and digest mode. So there's lots of different things about our modern lifestyles that tip us into this fight and flight mode. So I'm going to list them for you now. So think about which one might apply to you. So the first one that springs to mind for me is that we have now, because of modern technology, we are not so dependent on the natural timings of light and darkness in our day. So we're not so dependent on the sun coming up and then using the daylight to do what we need to do. And then when it's dark, we're stuck. There's nothing we can do, so we may as well go to sleep. Because we now have, electric light, bright light, we've got all this modern technology, we can trick our bodies into thinking it's daytime when it's nighttime or nighttime when it's daytime. This is particularly hard for people that work funny shifts, if you're a night worker, or if you're somebody that works in a particularly bright place or particularly dark place. These kinds of extremes are going to make it very hard for your body to actually self-regulate and to know what time of day it is. So it's really, that is a massive impact on our nervous system regulation. It's understanding the importance of embracing the light first thing in the morning, and then also avoiding the bright lights, in the evening when we want to be reducing our cortisol, coming out of the daytime mode and getting into nighttime mode. Having bright lights on, having the bright TV or your phone, reflecting light onto you, it's really quite distracting. And the other thing is we've got a lot more stressors in our lives today. So, in the days of our nomadic African plain times, when we were a hunter-gatherers, there were very little life stresses, okay? There was no pollution, there were no toxin, there was no bills to pay, there was no boss phoning you up wondering where that report was, there were no traffic lights, there were no school homework, there were none of these things going on. All the things that we stress about today, we didn't have thousands and thousands of years ago. So what that means is that in those days, thousands of years ago, the only stress would have come from a famine, from a disease, an illness, from an injury, from that tiger coming to attack us. But these episodes of stress would have been very short, very few and far between. They wouldn't have been sort of daily experiences. They certainly wouldn't have been hourly experiences like they are today for us. So in our olden times, we were able to stay in that rest and digest mode for much longer in the day because we didn't have all these stresses going on. And the problem is that when your body senses stress, and it could be stress from a tiger or it could be stress from a new massive bill that's come in the post today, it doesn't matter what that stress is. Your body can't distinguish what the stresses are. It can't distinguish whether it's a life-threatening stress or just like an everyday life stress. So it puts the body into that fight and flight mode. Straight away, you've slunk back into your fight and flight mode and you're stuck there because an hour later, you're sitting in traffic and you're late for a meeting. An hour after that, the kids come home and they're arguing. An hour after that, you're suddenly thinking, what am I going to make for dinner? I've got nothing in. I've now got to go down to the shops and get some food in. Whatever it is, all these little stressors build up and build up over the day. And so we end up spending too much time in this fight and flight mode and not enough time into rest and digest mode. Other things that can put us into this fight and flight mode is our diet. And that can be in two different ways. If we do a lot of sort of intermittent fasting or we cut calories for too long, trying to diet and lose weight, we can actually put the body into that fight and flight mode because the body thinks that we're in famine. So it goes into fight and flight mode and shuts everything down to preserve itself because it thinks that we're in a time of famine. So extreme dieting can do this, or extreme intermittent fasting can do this. It can also be that our diet is, maybe it's really high in things like sugar and caffeine, which are real stimulants and can really sort of get the body back into that fight and flight mode by overstimulating it. Or maybe, the body, even though we live in a time of plenty of food, we don't always have the most nutritious diet. So it's possible to be getting plenty of calories, but actually your body is still starved maybe of particular nutrients. It could be a B vitamin, could be vitamin C, could be protein, could be fiber, whatever it is. We talk about all the different foods all the time. But if your body is starving of particular key nutrients, the body's gonna think it's in famine, and it's gonna go into this fight and flight mode. So this means that we're constantly living with this ever so slightly raised cortisol and this ever so slightly increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, increased digestive function, increased brain, being on guard, on alert all the time, and it really put a lot of pressure on the body. So we need to think about this. We need to think about what this is doing to our body, how it's draining our body of really key nutrients, draining the body of energy. It wears us out, and eventually the nervous system just doesn't know where it is, and it gets completely dysregulated. And this can really drive a lot of the chronic conditions and the complaints that a lot of people on Eat Better, Feel Better talk to me about all the time. So poor sleep, not being able to lose weight, IBS, bloating, poor mental health, low mood, issues with hormones, issues with periods, things like that. All of these things can happen because our nervous system is dysregulated, and it puts so much pressure on the body that everything else starts to shut down. So now we know where it's coming from. What can we do to help to avoid this, to put our body back into this rest and digest mode, which is so nourishing and nurturing for the body? So there's a few things that we can do. The first thing that I would suggest that you try is you really try to develop a good routine. And Eat Better, Feel Better is all about routine. I talk about routine for meal times. I talk about routine for the day, how you structure your day and things like that. Your body loves routine. Your body, your hormones, everything runs on a clock, on its own body clock, and a routine is really, really helpful for maintaining that and for putting the body into its comfort zone. So trying to stick to a regular routine is really important. So try and make sure that you can get up around about the same time every day. Try and have your breakfast, lunch, dinner, your mini meal snack, whatever it is, around the same times every day. It's not always possible, but the more often you can do that than not, the better. And then to try at the end of the day to have a routine for bedtime, think about going to bed more or less the same time every evening, getting the body into that routine, so the body starts to feel more comfortable. It starts to understand that this is a safe time, everything's fine, there's no immediate threat, and it can go into this rest and digest mode more comfortably. The obvious thing that, the hardest thing to say to someone who is stressed and in fight and flight mode is to reduce stress, because how do you tell a stressed person to be less stressed? But that is really what you want to try and do. You really want to try and reduce as much stress in your life, in your mind as you can, on the body as you can. So there's lots of different stresses in the body. So maybe the way you'll reduce stress is by reducing the exposure to pollution, to chemicals. Maybe you'll try and have, a slightly cleaner diet. Maybe you'll try and use organic products where you can on your body, things like that, to reduce the toxic load on the body. That can be really helpful. Maybe you'll try and do, get a better sort of work-life balance so that you can have some time to sit, to relax, to be, sitting on the sofa, just, with a book or with some breath work or listening to some calming music, and just really trying to reduce stress that way. Maybe there's particular relationships in your life that are very stressful, and you need to find a way to put up those sorts of boundaries and barriers to protect yourself, to protect your nervous system from the stress that these relationships bring in. Maybe you can speak to people at work and see if you can manage your work stress in a better way. Maybe the workload can be spread, or deadlines could be extended, or just trying to manage that kind of time a little bit better to reduce stress that way. And sometimes you need someone to remind you of these things to actually do them. You get so caught up in the tunnel of what's going on that for someone to say, well, can you not speak to people at work and see if you can address the workload a little bit? And then people go, oh yeah, okay, well, I could try that. And they actually find that work are very receptive to it, and things can be done to make it easier. So it's definitely worth approaching, HR or your boss or work colleagues and seeing if that, if it's work stress that's causing the problem, how can you address that? How can you sort of make things easier for yourself at home? Maybe through meal planning, maybe through having a regular food shop come, so you know that you've always got food in the house, and with a meal plan, so you know what you're eating every day. All these little things of feeling a bit more organized, a bit more in control, are going to help to reduce stress in the mind and on the body. Breath is so important. We forget, could we breathe automatically? We forget how to breathe. Make sure you're breathing well. There is a breathwork handout on the Eat Better, Feel Better membership portal. It's all about taking really sort of mindful breaths as much as you can, making sure that you're taking oxygen right into the body. Breathing can really help to regulate so many different parts of the body, and it can really help to bring in that rest and digest mode. Movement is another one, whether it's a walk outside or a Pilates or yoga class, or maybe if you enjoy it, something a little bit more energetic, but finding whatever that movement is for you that you enjoy, to try and find time for that in your life is really important, because again, that's giving you that time in that rest and digest mode. Time outside, we really underestimate, as I touched on before, we are animals. We are naturally, animalistic creatures. We still need to be outside in nature, and our modern life takes that away from us quite a lot. So you really want to try and get outside in nature as much as you can. Grounding, where you're walking barefoot on the grass, is amazing for bringing the body into rest and digest and taking it out of fight and flight mode. Obviously in the UK in the winter, you're probably not going to want to do that, but just getting time outside, sitting in nature, listening to nature, feeling the nature around you is so grounding and so helpful for getting the body into that rest and digest mode. And then, of course, diet. Of course, my last big tip for nervous system regulation is, of course, going to be about diet. Trying to make sure that your food is as nutritiously dense as possible. Are you getting enough protein? Are you getting enough vegetables and fruit, fiber, antioxidants in your diet? Are you drinking enough water in your day to really support the body that way? We need water. So all these things are really important. So it is quite helpful sometimes to kind of take a step back and think about your nervous system. How could you be regulating your nervous system a little bit better? How could you make sure that you're in rest and digest mode a little bit more often, and that you're out of that fight and flight mode as much as you can be? And you will notice that a lot of the inflammatory markers, things like blood pressure and cortisol and cholesterol, all these markers all come down, because the body's getting time to process everything in this rest and digest mode. And you'll notice that you'll sleep better, you'll have more energy, you'll wake up in the morning and you will feel refreshed, and you'll want to get up and start your day. And you will notice that gradually the nervous system is getting back into the right sort of 24-hour clock, and it's getting into the right sort of regulation. So I hope you found that helpful, and I will see you all next time.